Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you. It is Monday, August 19th. What is up, everybody? This podcast right here marks the start of me being back locked in on this feed once a week. You guys can expect once a week episodes of Words with Wallace moving forward, despite the fact that we are very much still in the middle of the NBA offseason here. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to that. I did enjoy a little extra time off because I was home in Massachusetts for about a week there, enjoying some time with family and friends. I'm back and locked in. Did come home to my Wi-Fi being out, so shout out Spectrum for just being the absolute worst to deal with all week long. Took me a full week of sending somebody out here just for them to not fix anything. But finally, we are back online. Wi-Fi's back and better than ever, so I'm able to bring you this episode here today. And we have some great off-season content to talk about. Before I get into that, I should mention, in case you guys live under a rock, I hate to spoil this for anybody, the Team USA men's basketball team did come away with the gold medal, so congratulations to them. We are going to be quickly covering the last few games of that run for Team USA men's basketball before diving into ranking the top 10 point guards in the NBA. That is right, I am bringing back that off-season segment from last year that I did get a lot of positive feedback on. It's always fun to do some prime sports talk radio content for you guys here. It's always great being able to chop that up and turn it into a nice social media reel as well. So be sure to follow at Words with Wallace on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, so you're sure to never miss a clip there as well. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about, man. It was a pretty notable past 2 weeks in the basketball world, so let's dive right into it. Before we talk about Team USA and ranking the top point guards, I did just want to go over a couple of free agency headlines because I think this is going to be the last, and I truly mean the last, free agency headline that we will talk about on this podcast, unless there's any crazy trade or something like that that happens. But all the notes that I have are coming out of Utah because Lauri Markkanen, really the last remaining piece on the trade block and the last person that we were waiting on that contract being inked, has signed a 5-year, $238 million max contract extension with the Utah Jazz. So Lauri Markkanen is not going anywhere, and it's very notable that Lauri actually signed his contract on August 7th. The reason that's notable is because once you sign a contract extension in the NBA, you are not eligible to be traded for at least 6 months. 6 months from August 7th would bring us to February 7th, one day after the 2025 NBA trade deadline. So that being said, not only is Lauri locked in through the first half of the season, this would bring it 6 months to after the trade deadline. So he's essentially locked into being a member of the Utah Jazz for at least a calendar year, right? He is not going to be moved until the earliest would be basically the start of the 2025 NBA offseason. So Lauri is inked and signed a 5-year extension to stay in Utah. If he abides by that contract, obviously he'll be there for at least 5 more years. But not only that, he is definitely not even getting traded either. So just wanted to make that abundantly clear. So sorry to any Warriors fans or I don't know, Lakers fans. Who else was holding out hope that Lauri Markkanen was going to get traded and, turn around their franchise? I don't really know, but he's not going anywhere. So good for him. I'm sure he's sick of being traded. I think he's been traded, like 3 times in the NBA, right? He started off in Chicago and then got moved to Cleveland and then got moved to Utah, right? So pretty notable that Lauri is finally found a home. And I'm sure he's pretty comfortable in Utah, right? He's had a couple of really awesome years, back-to-back All-Star appearance the season before last, which is really exciting. So much-deserved contract extension for Lauri Markkanen. And if he ever does become available this time next year, I'm sure a lot of teams are going to be interested as well. It is worth noting one more free agency blurb we're going to cover. Patty Mills still getting contract. Love me some Patty Mills. Don't know if you guys know that about me. Patty Mills just lightning in a bottle, dude. This guy's been lightning in a bottle for over a decade. I can't believe he's not the oldest player in the NBA, but it is worth noting Patty made some waves for the Australian men's basketball team in the Olympics like he always does, and then signed to a 1-year, $3 million contract also with the Utah Jazz. So shout out Patty Mills. I would be remiss to not mention a Patty Mills contract extension on this podcast here. So that does it for free agency. Let's talk about Team USA. And I know this is old news at this point in time. You guys are probably well aware of what has happened with Team USA men's basketball, but I did just want to get it out there on this podcast of how crazy the last couple games were for Team USA. Wanted to talk about that a little bit. So they did go undefeated in, of course, the exhibition matches. They also went undefeated in group play. And then the first game of the actual Olympic tournament, Team USA men's basketball absolutely destroyed Brazil. Really not much to talk about there as well. But it really gets interesting when we're talking about the semifinals in which Team USA faced off against Serbia a couple weeks ago at this point. And this was a nightmare start for Team USA, right? They were down the entire game. Serbia was really in control. Just some really weird defensive strategy from Team USA going against Serbia, which of course is headlined by Nikola Jokic. Bogdan Bogdanovic as well had a monster game, which we're going to talk about more in a little bit. So there were a couple of notable NBA guys. I think, who is it? Micic from the Thunder, or formerly Thunder. Now he's on the Charlotte Hornets. He was, notable in that game as well. So quite a few NBA guys floating around on that Serbia team. But of course, Jokic is the headline there. A lot of weird decisions to double him at some really inopportune times. Like, not only just like doubling Jokic period is probably a bad idea, because he is, in my opinion, the best passer in the NBA and overall the best player in the NBA as well. So he's always making the right reads. Serbia was gunning out the gate early on, and just really like bad double teams, like ones that even not a great playmaker would be able to diagnose the right read. So weird defensive strategy led to a hot start for Serbia. The shots weren't falling for Team USA. But luckily for Team USA, Steph Curry had what I believe is the best Olympic performance of all time, at least on the men's basketball side of things. Like, he was unbelievable. He was literally the only person that could put the ball in the hoop in the first half. He finished the game with 36 points when really nobody else had anything going. There were some nice bright spots from Joel Embiid, who always seems to get up against Jokic, right? He had a pretty good offensive game. Defensively, I still felt like that he left some to be desired there, but regardless, they were able to mount a truly historic comeback. At one point, Serbia was up by 16 points, and even heading into the fourth quarter, Serbia was up by 13 points. And again, 10-minute quarters in the Olympics, like, these things just fly by. It was really looking grim for Team USA there, but the trio of Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant became the driving forces. And again, there was a really nice offensive run from Joel Embiid. Still felt like he did his normal Embiid stuff, where he got gassed at the end of the game and definitely left some on the table, like a couple of rebounds he could have gobbled up, as well as some, defensive miscues that I thought maybe we were better suited going to Anthony Davis down the stretch of that game once Embiid had his offensive flurry. But regardless, people are going to remember that as a Steph Curry game, right? 36 points. The fact that it was literally, he was the only hope for the United States in that game. And of course, people are also going to remember Bogdanovic and his performance, right? He had 20 points for Serbia. But not only that, he really poked the bear when Serbia was firing on all cylinders. I want to say it was halfway through the third quarter, he had just hit a big three. He looks over at Carmelo Anthony in the stands, and he does the Melo headbang three thing that Melo would always do back in the day. And LeBron took offense to it. He starts talking to Bogdanovic. So at that point, I certainly wasn't confident that that was going to spark a run. I was very hopeful that LeBron was going to take offense, and hopefully Team USA was going to spark a comeback. And that's exactly what they did. Basically, from that point forward, it was all Team USA the rest of the way. So it was kind of funny that Bogdanovic had a real moment there that nobody's going to remember, unless they're, of course, making fun of him doing that celebration in front of Melo, and then ultimately choking away the game. So again, Steph once again bails out Steve Kerr and avoided a disaster for both Steve Kerr and Grant Hill. An embarrassment for the country, and it also would have been a really interesting Jokic conversation if they actually were able to mount up and defeat Team USA in the semifinal game in the Olympics. But we were really fortunate that Jokic was 0 of 6 on threes. Any of those jumpers fall at really any point in the game, we could be having a very different conversation about Serbia. So it was dicey, to say the least, but USA was able to mount a comeback and win 95-91 against Serbia. And then, of course, the gold medal game versus France. I mean, this one I was so excited for, especially with just how rocky the previous round was for Team USA. The fact that they had to go up against France on their home court was really interesting. Just first, a couple thoughts on France. I mean, it was an awesome Wembanyama game. I know that he certainly had his work cut out for him going against Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, and Bam Adebayo. But it really didn't matter who was guarding Wembanyama in this game. He really, if he gets the ball at the right spot next to the basket, he's going to score every single time. And even if he has momentum going to the hoop, he's been so good about the Euro step and how quickly he's able to change directions and just kind of go around dudes, that it was a pretty awesome game from him. Another notable performer for France, Guerschon Yabusele, former Boston Celtic. I mean, look, you guys see the sign and the banner in the background. If you guys are watching on YouTube, we know a thing or two about Big Gersh around here. And he was a monster for France, not only in this game, but really the entire run for France during the Olympics. The other games I saw from France, he was one of the leading scorers basically every single time out. He's really slimmed down. I think he's lost about 80 pounds, it looks like, compared to what he looked like when he was on the Celtics a couple years back. He was a former first-round pick of ours a few years back. But regardless, Gersh had a big game, not only in the gold medal game, dunking all over LeBron. I'm sure that footage has been scrubbed from the internet already. I guess you could argue that LeBron was trying to take a charge on that one, but Gersh dunked all over him. So big Gershon Yabusele, aka the Dancing Bear, little known nickname for him there. He played so well during his run with France that he has actually earned himself a 1 year, $3 million contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. So congratulations to him. Much deserved because he really was impressive during the Olympics. And so definitely worth like a low risk flyer for the Philadelphia 76ers to get potentially a backup power forward because they really don't have a lot of size off the bench. So that is a really good signing for them. But regardless, for Team USA, kind of changing gears here, they were up early and they stayed consistent throughout. It was rocky. I think the lead mostly stayed between 5 and 10 points for the entire game, but it was kind of the same old story, right? It was the trio of LeBron, Kevin Durant, and then later in the game, Steph Curry that kind of led them to victory. Steph Curry, notably enough, had a really interesting game for Team USA. Like, he was having a nightmare game in the gold medal game. Like, he was shooting the ball all right throughout, I guess, but he had 5 turnovers, and I think 4 of them were some of the most embarrassing turnovers you could possibly imagine, like pick six-esque turnovers that like, he would turn it over like right before half court. It would just like lead to a fast break layup. Like that happened multiple times. And of course, I'm sure you guys have seen this all by now. Like how hot Steph got in the final 3 minutes of the game against France was amazing. He hit 4 threes in the final 3 minutes, including what was literally like an NBA Street game breaker for the final three, in which again he like put it behind his back, like took like an off-legged fadeaway over 2 defenders while LeBron and Kevin Durant were both standing by wide open. Steph drills the shot. Even listening to like the French announcers call the game, like calling Curry the devil and stuff like that. It was just really entertaining. Like it was truly an amazing way to close out the Olympics for Steph. And ultimately, Team USA came out with the gold. So it didn't exactly play out the way everybody expected, with a couple of those final games being extremely close and down to the wire. But regardless, USA continued their run of dominance on the men's basketball side of things. So just to put a bow on like the Olympic thoughts, I did just want to run through like my top 5 biggest winners of the Team USA men's basketball Olympics. And starting it off, I wanted to mention LeBron, right? He is the #1 winner and it's not even close. Like for him to have the keys to this Olympic team at his age, and he didn't disappoint, like he was truly unbelievable. He never had a single bad game throughout the entire run. We actually got to see what LeBron looks like as a full-time point guard, surrounded by obviously some of the best players in the world. But it just kind of made me and really anybody else watching like question where they actually rank LeBron among some of the top active players in the world right now. Because, I think he was like what, third team All NBA last year, and like you probably move him down a tier from, the upper echelon of difference makers and guys you want in your team if you're trying to win a title. But then you watch the respect he gets and him having the keys to the team, playing with literally all the best players in the country on the world's biggest stage, and he still delivers. Like, he literally never had a bad game. He was fantastic on both ends, and even the physicality of Olympic basketball, like, he still looked like arguably the best athlete on the court for most of the games. Like, the way he could get to the hoop and just lower his shoulder and take contact and finish at the rim, like, was second to none. So LeBron was definitely the biggest winner. I think they ultimately gave him like the Olympic basketball MVP, which weirdly isn't a word like they don't give out every year, but I guess they did for LeBron in this instance. And so it was certainly very well deserved. And I would say LeBron is definitely the biggest winner from Team USA. Steph Curry has to be a close second. Like it was pretty funny that he was having a pretty bad Olympics, like a pretty unnotable Olympics until you got to the final 2 games, obviously the monster game against Serbia and just the way he turned it around to close out France in the gold medal game. But like what an Olympic moment for Steph, right? Like a dude that played in his first and probably his last Olympics, for him to have arguably the best game in Olympic history and then followed by like the best, most exciting way to close out a gold medal game that we've ever seen. Like it was amazing. So I love Steph. He's my favorite player ever. So for him to have like a real Olympic moment in just one stint on the team is really notable. And then the third biggest winner has to be Kevin Durant, right? Like, again, he's the all-time Olympic scorer. He came back from injury and missed all of the exhibition games to be an immediate impact player in the group stage and, of course, the actual Olympic tournament. So we know what KD is, right? Like, it doesn't matter what the rules are, like how much the rules change from the NBA to Olympic basketball. Like, he's always going to be a bucket. His game is timeless. It wouldn't even surprise me if Durant somehow finds a way to play on this team in the next Olympics, but that being said, assuming it's his last Olympics, like what a run for Kevin Durant that it was. Number 4 on the list of winners, Anthony Davis. for me, the first time actually rooting for Anthony Davis in really any setting, I guess besides the last time he was on an Olympic team or whatever, but he was awesome. Like, I was just so impressed from what I saw from Anthony Davis. Like, he's such a defensive anchor. The impact that he made on the floor was unlike any other big man out there. And look, I really enjoyed watching Bam as well, and I thought he was impressive and is another guy that plays much bigger than he is. But the impact that Anthony Davis had just as a finisher around the rim and just the way other teams feared him going to the paint, like it's shocking. He's not bigger than just listed at 6'10", and he didn't even have to really get into his ability to, handle the ball or shoot the ball at all because of, he was just simply filling a role on this loaded roster. But Anthony Davis was easily our best big man throughout the tournament. Like, he definitely should have been starting for us and closing games for us, which I know he did on occasion. But if it wasn't for Steve Kerr's like weird obsession with making sure Joel Embiid was in the starting lineup almost every game, then I'm sure we would have seen even more Anthony Davis with how impressive he played. And then finally, the fifth winner on my list here, Devin Booker. It's definitely worth mentioning how well he played. Like, if there was any player to blame for the lack of Jason Tatum minutes, which we're going to talk more about in a second, it has to be Devin Booker, because he just really didn't make any mistakes out there. Like, he fully embraced his role as like a spot up shooter and a cutter and somebody who moves off the ball. And even defensively, like, that was the best defense I've ever seen Devin Booker play. I don't think we played a ton of like really scary Olympic guards, right? Like, Shea was obviously in the mix, but we usually had Drew Holiday and others for him. But besides that game against Canada, I think that, we certainly had the guard advantage no matter what out there, and he wasn't asked to guard like the best player on the other team, but he certainly held his own. Like, it was the best defense I've ever seen Devin Booker play. Shot the ball really well, was super confident, and very much embraced his role. Like, it was really cool to see Devin Booker in that setting, and he really thrived. And so he got those minutes over Jason Tatum. Clearly, Kerr was more comfortable with Devin Booker to start and close games rather than Anthony Edwards as well. So I'd say the five biggest winners in order: LeBron, Steph, KD, Anthony Davis, followed by Devin Booker. Obviously, those guys all played fantastic. The biggest loser of the Olympics, like, let's face it, the elephant in the room, it's still Jason Tatum. I did just want to mention he didn't play at all in the Serbia game. He did play a handful of minutes against France and honestly didn't make a huge impact. I mean, look, I understand that Tatum wasn't shooting the ball all that well. He was not playing all that well, even in like the exhibition games and the group stage and everything like that. But it's still Jason Tatum, dude. It's still a guy that's 6'10". His skill set translates extremely well to Olympic basketball in theory. We literally saw him as the second best player on the team that won the gold medal back in 2021. And so I still hate the idea to bench anybody, let alone a guy of Tatum's stature. And so, everybody's clowning him, and I get it to an extent, right? It's a pretty, it's low hanging fruit when you're, playing amongst all the best players in the world. And this guy who's a superstar and just won the title doesn't even play. I get why other teams and fans of other teams would talk smack. So, but it pisses me off. I still just disagree with it thoroughly. Like, you can always carve out minutes for a guy like that. Even early in the Serbia game, dude, like, they're sitting in this weird zone that's giving our offense like a bunch of headaches, and we have like a two big lineup of both Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo on the floor together, and we have Bam, the one in the corner, who is like repeatedly catching the ball in a situation to catch and shoot corner threes. And it's like, that's where you put in Tatum, right? Because you're not sacrificing any size going from Bam to Tatum. You're really not sacrificing much as far as perimeter defense, if at all, right? And you can still leave him out there and at least, in theory, shoot the ball with confidence. I know he wasn't shooting all that well, but just weird stuff like that where you could have worked Tatum into the lineup and you didn't. And especially just knowing that Tatum is one of really just like three locks for next year's Olympic roster for Team USA. I would say him, Devin Booker, and then, of course, Anthony Edwards are like the three mega locks for that roster. I mean, I'd expect to see Halliburton, who also didn't play as well. But just the fact that you couldn't carve out any minutes for a guy of Tatum's stature, knowing he's going to be likely the face of the team next time around, is pretty frustrating. So I'll leave it at that. Steve Kerr is very lucky. It is already announced that he is unlikely to return as the head coach for Team USA as well. So I don't know. I guess he's probably going to be replaced by, assuming it's Eric Spoelstra or Ty Lue, who were sitting right next to him on the bench. We'll see if it's different next time around. But it was a really entertaining Olympics. And of course, congratulations. I was very happy to see Team USA make it to the gold medal game and ultimately come away with it, despite how rocky that game was over Serbia. Now let's move on to ranking the top 10 point guards in the NBA. So a lot of you may remember, if you are longtime listeners, I did do this series last year where I ranked the top 10 point guards in the NBA, followed by the top 10 shooting guards, top 10 wings, and top 10 big men in the NBA. Got a lot of positive feedback, so I wanted to bring this series back. I think it'll be pretty fascinating to look back and see how this list changed from last year to this year. And for however many years I do this podcast, I just kind of have a running list of what I project the top 10 players at each position to be heading into the new NBA season. So wanted to mention that I am just kind of running this series back, but there are definitely some significant changes, and we'll after I go through my list for this year, I'll give you the list from last year and we can kind of compare and see who the big risers and fallers were. But just to go over some quick disclaimers before I get into the list, this is me projecting the top 10 point guards in the NBA for next season, right? It's not like a fantasy draft situation where I'm taking into account age or contract or anything like that. And at the same time, it's also not like a, all-time ranking where I'm measuring the legacy of all these guys in the NBA. It's nothing like that either. Simply, what are the guys I would want on my team heading into next season and just trying to rank them. And now, I haven't done the ranking for the other positions yet, but I must say, like, doing this ranking for the point guards was tough, man. Like, this was a very difficult list to make. I'm definitely going to get some negative feedback on it. I'm not going to make everybody happy with it. Because it's a really tough list. It's absolutely loaded. Like, there's actually a couple of guys that I had on the shooting guard list last year that I think now more closely fit in the point guard bucket. So I essentially added a couple new players to the field that I think are more closely aligned with point guards. And it just kind of bumped everybody down and bumped two players that I think are absolutely deserving off the list entirely. So it's kind of a shit show. We'll get into it, and you guys can let me know what you think. That's kind of the fun part of all this, is just kind of sparking some healthy water cooler debates out there. So hopefully this does just that. So let's not waste any more breath going over disclaimers and whatnot. Let's just dive right into it, right? First of all, I had 4 honorable mentions here. Darius Garland was a guy that I had as an honorable mention last year that I think, he had a down season, so I don't feel too bad about leaving him off, but he would be like kind of like my number 14 spot if I had to put him somewhere. But he is a player I really enjoy watching. Number 13, again, kind of the second honorable mention here, James Harden. This is actually a guy who was number 10 on my point guard list last year before he inevitably quit on the Sixers, quitted on his third team for those who are keeping track, and ended up with the Clippers. But even on the Clippers, I thought he had a really solid season last year. He is a truly incredible playmaker, even if he's not as talented or as aggressive as a scorer as he once was. But Harden's still a monster, man. I know people get frustrated with the defense and the playoff performances and everything like that, but most teams would still love to have a player of James Harden's caliber, and so he's definitely an honorable mention. But number 12 on this list, this is going to surprise some people. I had Trae Young, a dude that is an absolute stud, an absolute fantasy monster, certainly a guy who knows how to fill up the box score. It's just kind of crazy leaving off a guy who's had like 20 points and 10 assists plus for 3 straight years now. Just for context, he averaged 26 and 11 last year. But the bugaboo with Trae is just, the Hawks were so disappointing last year. Like, he's not on a winning team or whatever. Maybe they're above 500, but not a, contending team by any means. Like, he just hasn't been on enough good teams where I can really put him in this conversation. If you want to point to like the Eastern Conference Finals run that was pretty fluky like 3 years ago, be my guest, man. But this position is absolutely loaded, and with the defensive shortcomings and the turmoil in Atlanta and with them underperforming, I just can't make the argument to put Trae any higher, even though I think he is one of like the most talented offensive players in the entire NBA, and how he can just be like a one-man offensive show is really impressive. But there's just no room for him on this list, and so he's an honorable mention. And then finally, the first cut, if you will, from the top 10 here was De'Aaron Fox. So Fox had a really awesome season. I know he didn't win Clutch Player of the Year again like he did the previous year when he had all those amazing finishes to close games in the 2022-2023 season. But that being said, Fox actually improved a bit statistically. He was up to almost 27 points a game, almost 6 assists, and almost 5 rebounds. So really awesome year from De'Aaron Fox. I still think he is probably the best player on the Sacramento Kings, and especially with what he can do at the end of games. Fox is a monster. I really don't have any complaints. I mean, if you want to poke holes in Fox, it's just like you kind of see what having De'Aaron Fox as your best player kind of gets you in a loaded Western Conference, and the Kings are probably perennially going to be in that play-in race, and hopefully they get frisky and find a way to crack into the actual playoffs and maybe make a crazy upset. But I just can't really envision a world in which the Kings are going to be a top seed in the West anytime soon, even with them getting DeMar DeRozan in the offseason. And I really like De'Aaron Fox. I really enjoy watching his game. I think he's developed a lot more than people thought. And again, a lot of people clowned the Sacramento Kings when they decided to move on from Tyrese Halliburton and hold on to De'Aaron Fox. But I think there's a real argument to be made that that was a true win-win trade for what they got back in Sabonis. And Fox is a star in the NBA. It's just like, what does having De'Aaron Fox again as your best player get you? I'm not sure, but he's not in the same level as any of the guys in the top 10. And so as much as I like him, he is my final honorable mention before diving into the actual top 10. At number 10 on my list, this is where I have Jamal Murray. And I am a big Jamal Murray guy. I love his game. He was so impressive during that 2023 Nuggets championship run. And so this feels low. It feels very low for Jamal Murray. I can't lie. But basically, most people on this list feel very low. So this is kind of where I had him. He was number 5 on my list last year. Obviously, I had that post-championship boost for Jamal Murray, which I very much think is warranted, by the way, because of just how incredible he was during the playoffs, right? He was a true second star on that Nuggets team, really the only other star player on the team besides Jokic, in a team that handedly won the 2023 finals, right? He was just a monster down the stretch. He's so much better in the playoffs than the regular season. He's a really clutch player, but just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth after getting hurt again, struggling with injuries. The dude has still never made an all-star team. Comes back and is fantastic in the first round against the Lakers, but I feel like the biggest underperformance for the Denver Nuggets during that series against the Minnesota Timberwolves was Jamal Murray. Now, look, I know the Timberwolves had the best defense in the NBA and a lot of guys that clearly gave him some issues, but when you're the second best player on a team that has championship aspirations, you just kind of have to find a way to rise above it. I don't feel like Jamal Murray did in that series against the Timberwolves. And so ultimately, this is where he slots at number 10 on the list. Again, statistically, he had, they're kind of whatever. He's never been a massive stat accumulator, right? He averaged 21 points, almost 7 assists, and 4 rebounds. He's still a guy I'd love to have on my team. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he bounces back and ends up as a top 5 spot on next year's list, especially depending on how the Nuggets fare in the playoffs and everything like that. But it just kind of seems like there's bad vibes around Jamal Murray right now. I'm not going to take into account his Olympic play too much, but he was pretty brutal for those that watch Team Canada in the Olympics. And I just feel like there's a really talented position. There's other guys that have proven to be, really talented co-stars as well. I can't in good faith put him any higher on the list. So Jamal Murray slots in at number 10. Number 9 on the list, this is where I have Damian Lillard, another guy that fell quite a few spots from last year. I think he was number 3 on last year's point guard list. I still really like Dame Lillard. I know there's a lot of Bucks fans that do listen to this podcast, so apologies already for, the shock and awe that I just caused by putting Dame at number 9, but he did have a down year, and I think that's a little bit overblown, to be honest with you. I don't know really what Bucks fans or the general NBA media was expecting, getting Dame Lillard on a new team at his advanced age and everything like that. I still think in a lot of ways he is Dame Lillard. He's the same guy that teams are scared of. He performed really well and fought pretty valiantly for that Bucks team that was missing Giannis for that entire first round series of the Indiana Pacers. Like, the Bucks were able to steal a couple games in large part because of the excellence of Damian Lillard. There were still, even just during the regular season, some really tough games down the stretch where Dame absolutely closed out teams at the end of games, giving the Bucks a guy that they can go to, put the ball in his hands and allow him to create and put Giannis in the spot to succeed as well. Again, just the way the modern NBA is set up, it's not really conducive for guys of Giannis's size to be dribbling the ball and, creating their own shot late in games. So it's really nice for the Bucks to have Dame. I expect the Bucks to be better than what they were last year, and poor Dame here because he wasn't even able to play alongside Giannis in this playoff run. I mean, Giannis has basically been hurt for 2 straight years in the playoffs. So that being said, it's a lot of different factors here. I still think he's a fantastic player, but I think this ranking and him falling 6 spots is just more about this, again, pool of point guards getting a little bit deeper and just some guys who improved a lot from this time last year to now. So Dame slots in at number 9. At number 8, this is where I have Tyrese Maxey. He's one of those guys who I actually ranked on the shooting guard list last year because I felt like he played off the ball more with Harden there. Of course, Harden bullied his way to get to Los Angeles, and so Maxey was forced to play more of the point guard role, so I felt like it was more appropriate to rank him at this position. And I had him number 6 on the shooting guard list last year. He slots in number 8 on my point guard list. I mean, Maxey was awesome. He was ultimately won, I believe, the most improved player award, which he was my pick before the season, and I felt like he was basically a lock once Harden got traded, and ultimately that's how it played out. But he was awesome for Philadelphia, and he, again, had to shoulder the load without Joel Embiid for the majority of the regular season. I mean, his shooting, his scoring, just his decision-making on the ball, he's a monster, and I know he is absolutely beloved in Philadelphia. Obviously saw a massive statistical increase in the absence of James Harden, averaged 26 points a game, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds. I still think he's going to be the number 2 guy for that Sixers team, even with the addition of Paul George. That's how highly I think of Tyrese Maxey. So, yeah, really nothing negative to say about Tyrese Maxey. I think he's awesome. The only reason he went down in the rankings is because he's now, being ranked at a much deeper position. So, love Maxey, and I think one spot above Dame feels very fair for him. At number 7, this is where I have Ja Morant. And so, obviously, a really difficult player to rank. He was actually ranked number 4 on my point guard list last year. So, dropped him 3 spots again because the position got a little bit deeper. And of course, Ja only ended up playing in 9 games last year. Came back from that weird suspension for the Instagram gun incident or whatever. And then I think he messed up his shoulder or something like that. Needed shoulder surgery that ended his season. But in the 9 games that we saw of Ja, it was the same old Ja, right? There was no concern or even any physical wear and tear that we saw on Ja before he ultimately was ruled out for the rest of the season. It was really just like a total wasted season for the Grizzlies. I mean, Desmond Bane missed a lot of time as well, and Marcus Smart was banged up, so really just a write-off season for the Grizzlies. But Ja did average 25 points a game, nearly 6 rebounds, and over 8 assists in those 9 games with the Grizzlies. It'll be interesting to see what we get from Ja Morant, if this is going to be like a full-on revenge tour. I know Grizzlies are like a really big dark horse team for a lot of NBA sharps out there, at least with like the regular season win totals, just because of how good they were in the regular season the last time we saw a fully healthy season from Ja Morant. And they've also retooled a little bit, getting Marcus Smart and some other guys in the mix as well. So I really don't like Ja. I can't say I enjoy him as a person or really enjoy his game, but he is supremely talented. This ranking could look really stupid. Like, Ja could just go nuts and end up in the top 3 next year, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think the top 2 are basically untouchable. But if he's number 3, it really wouldn't be surprising. I think everybody ranked from like 4 to 7 on my list is basically back to back. It's all extremely close, and it's really all preference based. So this is just where I landed for Ja Morant at number 7. At number 6 on my list, this is where I had Tyrese Halliburton. He's definitely the biggest riser of the list, considering I didn't even have him ranked this time last year, so that's pretty notable. I mean, he was just a monster player for the Indiana Pacers. Ultimately was awarded with 3rd team All-NBA, which I thought was complete BS because my guy Jaylen Brown definitely deserved it over Tyrese Halliburton, but whatever. That's not to say that Halliburton didn't have an awesome season. He was a monster for the Pacers. I think he led the league in assists, averaging 20 points and 11 assists. And of course, the Pacers made a pretty shocking Eastern Conference Finals run in large part because of the play of Tyrese Halliburton. So I have to give him a lot of credit. I just think he's certainly more dependable than Ja, right? Like all the off the court stuff with Ja obviously is not a concern with Tyrese Halliburton. I think they both have defensive concerns, more so with Tyrese Halliburton, right? He really is a turnstile. And I think offensively what holds him back is like he's a great 3-point shooter, but it just feels like he's looking for the 3 at all times when it comes to creating his own shot. Doesn't really operate much in the mid-range, and even getting to the basket, I think he leaves some to be desired there. So he's young. He had a really awesome breakout campaign last year. He could be even higher at this time next year, but I feel pretty comfortable ranking him at number 6 because of the boost that he gave the Indiana Pacers this year. At number 5, this is definitely my most controversial opinion. This is where I have Jrue Holiday, right? You can call me biased. Everyone sees the banner and the light up Celtics sign in the background for those that are watching on YouTube. So I guess this isn't a surprise to any of those folks. I have to be a little bit biased toward my guy, Jrue Holiday, but I don't know if I am. I really don't, because if you're a team that is trying to win a title, how many point guards would you rather have than Jrue Holiday? Especially if you already have a primary ball handler and shot creator and shot maker next to Jrue Holiday already. Like, I think Jrue Holiday is that perfect guy to fill in next to it. And it's not just because of his contributions with the Celtics. Like, this isn't the first time he's done this, right? Like, he did this on the Bucks 3 years ago as well, and he was like that perfect number 2, number 3 option on the Milwaukee Bucks next to Giannis and Chris Middleton. Like, Jrue's a dog. You even see it with the Olympic team, dude. Like, Jrue was starting a lot of those games for Team USA with the other best players in the world because he is incredible at filling his role. He's maybe the best perimeter defender in the entire NBA. He's certainly, in my opinion anyways, the best guard defender in the NBA. He now shoots the ball at well over 40% from 3. He led the entire NBA in corner 3-point percentage as well. And not to mention, he's just an incredible mover off the ball. He's an incredible screener. He's an incredible cutter. He knows where to be. He knows how to space. He knows how to complement other guys on the court. Like, what else can you ask for? Like, obviously, yes, I am biased here, and I'm going to give Jrue the rightfully deserved championship bump, right? And it wasn't even like this came out of nowhere. Jrue was ranked number 8 on my list last year before he was even a member of the Boston Celtics. I've always loved Jrue Holiday, but with him showing once again that he has what it takes to be the point guard on an incredible championship team, and what I've seen over the past several months of both NBA and Olympic basketball, I feel very comfortable putting Jrue Holiday at number 5 on my list. Like, as a Celtics fan, I'm sure there are other Celtics fans who are listening to this. Like, would you trade Jrue Holiday for Tyrese Halliburton? I absolutely would not. I absolutely would not. Would you trade him for Ja Morant? Like, I probably wouldn't. I understand that Ja has a ton of potential, but with the way the Celtics team is positioned, there's nobody in the NBA almost I would take over Jrue Holiday. Maybe, obviously, the top 4 guys on my list are pending and whatnot because some of them are really special generational talents. But for anybody that's not necessarily in that ballpark, I think you have to put Jrue above the rest of the list because of how perfect he is at filling his role. He's fantastic. I'm so lucky to have him on my team. I'm so glad the Celtics signed him to a long-term contract extension. And I think Jrue is very deserving at number 5 because as a Celtics fan, I'm telling you right now, I would much rather have Jrue Holiday than Tyrese Halliburton or Ja Morant. I understand if you're a neutral team, like let's just pick the shittiest team I can think of, right? Like the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards might as well be an expansion team because they really have like no talent at like any position, right? Anybody they're bringing into their building would be an upgrade for the most part. And so, like, sure, if you're starting a franchise from scratch and you don't know what the supporting cast looks like, maybe in that scenario, you take a guy like a Ja Morant or a Tyrese Halliburton over Drew Holiday, especially when you factor in the age and everything like that. I get that. But for the teams that actually want to win a title, like even the Milwaukee Bucks, would the Milwaukee Bucks rather just like call in Drew Holiday right now to, step in next to Dame Lillard, or would they rather have a guy like Tyrese Halliburton or Ja Morant? I think the answer is pretty clear. It's going to be Drew Holiday for all those teams that have some playmakers in place and actually want to win a title. So I rest my case on Drew Holiday at number 5. At number 4 on my list, this is where I have Jalen Brunson. I think there's clearly a tier break between the top 4 guys, and then of course my guy Drew Holiday at number 5. I did just want to give Brunson and everybody else that is forthcoming on this list a little bit of credit here because Brunson's a dog, man. I absolutely love him. Averaged 29 points per game, nearly 4 rebounds, and nearly 7 assists for the New York Knicks in his second full season with the Knicks. This is really going to be a huge season for Jalen Brunson because the Knicks are officially looked at around the NBA as a true contender, which is like the first time in at least 10, maybe 20 years since the Knicks have been considered in that light. And so Brunson is obviously the biggest part of that. He is no doubt the most talented player on that team. He is a guy that can score the ball at will. He is a guy you can put the ball in his hands at the end of games and expect him to create quality shots for his team, for himself, for his teammates. It doesn't really matter. Brunson is quite simply that guy, right? Signed a massive contract extension that I guess could have been a little bit larger if he waited until this time next year. But again, he took the well-deserved massive pay raise that he received, which is hilarious to think about because when he signed with the Knicks about 2 years ago, it was very controversial, right? People thought it was an overpay for the Knicks to pay, like, what was it, like 3 years, 90 million, something in that ballpark for Jalen Brunson then. And now that is chump change for a guy who was actually in the MVP conversation last year and ultimately was very close to making first team All-NBA as well. Finished on second team, but I really have nothing negative to say about Jalen Brunson. I think he is awesome. I think the Knicks are extremely lucky to have him. And I think it remains to be seen if he can be the best player on a contending team. But this is going to be the year for the New York Knicks where they're already positioned to do that. So very excited for what's to come from Jalen Brunson and to see if he can get even better. I mean, he made a real leap his first season with the Knicks. He made another leap last year. Excited to see what he does in year 3 in New York. At number 3 on my list, this is where I have my all-time favorite player, Steph Curry. Love Steph. I know it was a relatively down year for Steph. He only shot a little over 40% from 3, which is about 2 or 3% lower than what his career averages are. So I guess if you want to point at that, but again, really nothing to do with Steph's play that dropped him down a spot. He's still the man. I still think if the Warriors were a little bit more serious of a franchise and wanted to contend around Steph Curry and really go all in on building the optimal roster around Steph and going out and making a swing for a guy like Lauri Markkanen, I would very much still consider the Warriors to be contenders. I think Steph is that good. I don't know if maybe he has lost a step a little bit here, but still just the way his game is going to age, he's going to be excellent for many more years to come with how he can shoot the ball. He still gets to the basket at will, even better than what he did at early stages of his career. So I really have nothing negative to say about Steph Curry whatsoever besides that I just wish the Warriors were a little bit better around him because I think the league is a lot more fun when the Warriors are one of those contending teams in the West. But hey, maybe Steph will just, start averaging 30 again and the Warriors will be right back in the mix. It really wouldn't be all that shocking because Steph Curry is just that good. Number 2 on my list, this is where I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. So Shai was actually listed on my shooting guard list last year. I felt like Josh Giddey was more of the point guard of that Thunder team last year. But of course, as we saw, Josh Giddey was kind of out of the rotation for a bit there in the playoffs and ultimately against the Dallas Mavericks for the Oklahoma City Thunder this past year because of his inability to shoot the ball and because Shai is just that special with the ball in his hands as well. He can be the true point guard for this team like he was during clutch time situations for the Thunder last year. And now, of course, that Josh Giddey is a member of the Chicago Bulls, I feel much more comfortable putting SGA as the point guard, so to speak, of the Oklahoma City Thunder. So now that he's ranked at the point guard position, he basically bumps everybody on the list besides my number 1 guy down. So that's why Steph dropped a spot and basically everybody else dropped spots compared to where they were last year. It's just because Shai is that good, right? Shai is undeniable at this point, averaged 30 points per game last year as to accompany 6 rebounds and 6 assists, really insane shooting splits. The fact that he's able to score the ball as well as he does without really utilizing the 3-point shot all that much, like he only takes about 2 threes per game. So if he's able to, improve at least the volume of the 3-point shooting and still stay at like 35, 36% from three. Like he could easily average closer to like 35 points per game, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I do think Shai is that talented of a scorer. I think he actually finished as like the number 2 MVP runner up next to, of course, Nikola Jokic this past year. I personally had a different guy in that spot, but that being said, Shai wasn't very far off. I think he was number 3 for me. I mean, he's just a monster. He's a really talented defender as well. I think the Thunder, you can make the argument that they're actually the team to beat coming out of the West with the improvements that they've made around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So, yeah, we know who Shai is, man. He is a truly special player, and he's entering his prime years. So, certainly very excited to watch the Thunder next year. But ultimately, the number 1 spot on my top point guards list, this is where I have Luka Doncic. It's really a no-brainer. I mean, the list really basically started at 2 just because of how good Luka was. And of course, ultimately led the Dallas Mavericks to a really unexpected NBA Finals run. Of course, they got stomped out by a better team, call it what it was, but that's really nothing, no shade against Luka in that matchup, right? He was truly special last year, especially statistically, averaged 34 points per game, 9 rebounds, and 10 assists. Again, 34, 9, and 10. That is ridiculous. I know his playoff numbers were a little bit lower, but he certainly was pretty banged up by the end of the year. And so, yeah, I mean, what is there negative to say about Luka? I mean, if you want to poke at the attitude thing or even the lack of defense, I think that's been called out quite a bit, certainly since the NBA playoffs. But Luka is still 6'7". Like, you can still put him on the other team's power forward most of the time, and it's really not going to give you any issues. And especially during the regular season, I mean, that guy is such a dog. He is truly, I believe, the second best player in the world behind only Jokic. But I have nothing bad to say about Luka. I mean, he's truly a generational talent. The Mavericks are going to be in the mix every single year of that guy's career just with how special he is. So it's really not all that shocking that the Mavs we're a few years early on their NBA Finals run with that guy at the helm. So there's really no telling what Luka's going to do next year, man. I don't know how he could possibly improve statistically, but I will be watching either way because Luka is just that special of a player. So that is going to do it for my top 10 point guards list. Let's quickly just run back the list from this year. At my honorable mention spots, I had Trae Young and De'Aaron Fox. They were kind of like the first cuts there. Number 10, Jamal Murray. Number 9, Damian Lillard. Number 8, Tyrese Maxey. Number 7, Ja Morant. Number 6, Tyrese Halliburton. Number 5, Drew Holiday. Number 4, Jalen Brunson. Number 3, Steph Curry. Number 2, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And number 1, Luka Doncic. And quickly, just to compare that to the list from last year, this time last year I had Harden at number 10, followed by Trae at number 9, Drew at number 8, Brunson at number 7, Fox at number 6, Jamal Murray at number 5, Ja at number 4, Dame at number 3, Steph at number 2, and Luka was again my number 1 selection this time last year as well. So definitely some interesting changes there. I think the biggest winner or biggest riser, if you will, is Tyrese Halliburton, who went from unranked all the way up to number 6 on my list. I think the one who fell the most was probably Dame, just going from number 3 to number 9. But again, like I said before, I still love Dame Lillard. I don't think he had that disappointing of a season. I just think a couple of younger guys kind of passed him by on this list. So again, I hope you guys enjoy this exercise. Definitely let me know your feedback on this list, where you agree, certainly where you disagree. I'm sure nobody's going to be shy about sharing that with me, especially when I turn this into a clip and post it on social media, because inevitably nobody ever listens to the full explanation on the podcast. They just want to see the quick 60-second video. But this is going to be a fun series we hopefully do for years to come. So definitely let me know what you think. I will be back with another episode at this time next week, most likely doing the top 10 shooting guards in the NBA list. I might look to bring on a guest as well. So if I am able to schedule a guest, that's what the content will be about. But inevitably, we are going to finish up this ranking series before the start of the next NBA season. Before I let you go, be sure to follow Words with Wallace on everything. That includes Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as social media, Words with Wallace on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. Be sure to follow the show there and support my content. And I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.